The Crf 230F. This bike holds a special place in my heart. After all, my entire channel is more or less based on it. So after riding this bike for close to a decade, as well as posting several riding videos on the channel, I figured I'm about due for a nice little review video on it. And that's why we're here right now. Now, before we go any further, I'm not really going to go into mechanical details or specs very much, if at all. I'm pretty much inept when it comes to that stuff, but all that info is available on the websites and forums anyways, so I just think it's unnecessary. All I really want to do here is give you guys an idea of how this bike rides, who it might cater to, the nature of the maintenance, essentially the pros and cons that I've encountered over the years. So, without further ado, let's get started.
If you want, you go ahead and lead the way. I'll follow you up there.
So just to give you a little background about my riding skill and overall build, I would basically say I'm somewhere around the intermediate level. And granted, that's only in terms of a trail rider. I've never actually competed, and the types of riding don't vary much as I live in the northern portion of Indiana. I also got into this sport a tad late in the game for some reason. I guess I just didn't know many people in my younger years who were into dirt biking. So I suppose I wasn't very influenced until my young adult years. I am still fairly young, however, and it's definitely something of a better late than never scenario. As far as my build, I'm about 5'6", usually fluctuating between 160 to 170 pounds throughout the year. I am highly athletic, so I don't feel I'm lugging around any extra weight or anything. I honestly can't emphasize enough how important fitness is in a sport like dirt biking, or really any sport for that matter, but that's going to be for another video. Now about the bike, this is an all-stock 2003 Crf 230F. The only thing I had to put on were the Moose full wraparound handguards. That's pretty much it though. I believe it was the first year of its kind, and it was pretty much based off of the older air-cooled XR lineup from Honda. And yes, this bike is air-cooled as well. I would say the overall design is absolutely about simplicity and reliability. The 230 basically defines user-friendly. It has nice features such as electric start, low seat height, 6-speed gearbox, kickstand, just about everything your average trail rider could ever want on a trail bike. The overall size and extremely predictable power of the bike really makes it that much more user-friendly to anyone from the more, say, vertically challenged demographics to the taller freaks of nature, so to speak. So long as you know how to work the throttle, clutch, shifter, and brakes properly. After that, you're pretty much ready to rip. Now I've been riding this bike for somewhere around 10 years at this point, so I think I've got a good feel for the positives and negatives. The 230 seems to feel most at home with the slower, tighter trails. We're pretty much talking around second gear 90% of the time. You're bobbing and weaving between the tight trees, and I gotta tell you, this thing can really lug at the lower speeds, and I don't really have any issues with stalling. I've taken this thing over some pretty gnarly terrain in its time. I mean, we're talking large, loose rocks, roots, deep mud, small to mid-sized logs, all kinds of stuff. And I gotta admit, I'm kind of surprised with how capable this Honda is in technical terrain. Even though this is a smaller bike with less suspension travel and all, it will get you over most obstacles that are in your way, so long as you have the skill to get the job done, of course. And, with this bike, there is such a thing as too technical, and you may end up trading those more extreme achievements on the trail for a little more discomfort than you bargained for. But more on the suspension later. Now, if you're thinking about getting one of these, or if you already have one by any chance, hill climbs are something you must experience. Like the tight single tracks, second gear is probably going to be the magic number for you, so long as you have the skill and willpower to climb that dirt wall. Now, seriously, this thing's a tractor, and I've taken mine up some really steep hills before, and I wouldn't doubt I could go any steeper if I wasn't such a poon. The power's both good and bad, really. Mostly good, but the bad becomes more apparent as your skill increases. Something that I've noticed in recent times, but we'll get to that later. The 230cc motor is quite the oddball displacement in the land of 125s, 250s, and 450s and so on, but I really think that's what makes it so unique and attractive to smaller and more casual trail riders like myself. I mean, hell, even taller folks seem to love this thing. It makes a great play bike, everybody seems to love it, no matter what size you are. The power is really predictable and forgiving, and I think that linear nature of the bike is a large part of what makes it so appealing to riders of all skill levels. Now, maintenance is always important for any dirt bike, so we're going to go over what you need to do. Now, pay attention because this is key. Are you ready? Change the oil after every couple of rides, clean the air filter, lube the chain, replace the chain and sprockets and tires once they're worn out, and wash your bike after every ride if you can. Seriously, that's pretty much it. Oh, and pro tip, don't forget to refill the gas tank every now and then.
Not good. I think I just ran out of gas, man.
Okay, so what about the negatives? Well, in short, it's mainly two things: power and suspension. This is the only dirt bike that I've ever owned, and I cannot overstate how important this 230 is to anyone who is a beginner at the sport and will allow for a longer time frame to avoid outgrowing it so quickly, much like many of the kid bikes out there. As I've said before, I've been riding this same bike for around 10 years, and if I were being honest, I should have made an upgrade 2 or more years ago. A lot of that has to do with a lack of riding on my part for a couple years, so we can probably shave off a little extra time from that. But I've been fairly consistent in riding for a while now, and I do have much more of a passion for the sport than before, along with an increasing skill level, so the cons are becoming pretty obvious to me. Power becomes an issue usually around 5th and 6th gear, especially on loose terrain, and we're talking higher speeds obviously. And honestly, that's not too big of an issue so long as you're not dual sporting this thing. But much of the riding that I have done this year involved fire roads up in Michigan or cornfields here in Indiana during the Enduros. This bike does not seem to like high speeds, and I sometimes question why Honda would even put a 6-speed on this bike. Even 4th gear can be a tad lacking if you're on super loose terrain and you're trying to get up to speed. Of course, this is a stock model. Perhaps it can be opened up significantly to mitigate this issue. Another minor thing is its inability to lift the front wheel just by the twist of the throttle. If anything, this just makes it more difficult to hop over some of the larger obstacles on the trail. And really, you can forget about pivot turns. However, you could always do the whiskey clutch.
Oh! I saw that one coming!
What really sucks with this bike is the suspension. It's horrible. It's god-awful. It's a blight on society, the pinnacle of suffering, the reason why my legs despise me. This, folks, is why I always end up at the back of the pack. Now, there's not much to be said here, honestly. The suspension is just so damn soft. Once you start getting fairly good at riding, you know, you're picking up speed, you're zigzagging through the trees nicely, you find that flow, you start keeping up with your buddies a fair amount, and all of a sudden you see those godforsaken whoops on the trail, or the larger obstacles you can't quite hop over with such ease as the bigger bikes could.
Good Lord. I fucking hate them. You kidding me? Yeah, I told you I had to literally air squat on this bike.
Yeah, you're using everything. Your legs and...
If my legs are not used as a secondary suspension, I'm going down.
You start feeling like that little beginner again, going much slower. Maybe even putting the bike down and eating shit. Losing your pace and your flow, then boom, your buddies are long gone.
Just go. Just go. Leave me behind. I can't do this shit. Sally forth!
These more extreme scenarios where it seems the bigger bikes can just glide right over without missing a beat, they can actually bring down your morale substantially as you start falling behind at the whims of the 230's limits. All that being said, I friggin' love this bike. And even once I get the funds to get myself a good old two-stroke for the trails, I can't see myself ever getting rid of this bike. I just can't bring myself to do it because it's that great of a bike and it's got me so far in the world of dirt biking. And for all of its faults, I still run as hard as I can through the trails with a nice big smile under my helmet. The sad fact is, I've reached its limits. Sure, I could get the necessary upgrades and make it 1,000 times better than stock. True. But I've ridden it for so long that I just want something different and more challenging. But in keeping it, I will always have something that is so much fun and easy to ride. It'll make a great and reliable backup bike. And I will also have something for a friend to ride, possibly creating another dirt biker for the world to enjoy. Or for the neighbors to be pissed off at, of course.